Hello, everyone, and welcome to Steady State Fireside Chat. Today I'm here with Jonathan Libby, the founder and CEO of Steady State, Jasmine Bronson, who is the head database engineer at Steady State, and our special guest, Neil Zumwalde, who is the founder at Credmark, and Joseph Collier Gray, who is the strategic operations at Credmark. Any questions that rise up during our discussion, feel free to write them in the stream chat and I'll forward them to our speakers. Please keep in mind that we are not financial advisors and nothing we say should be taken as such. This is for entertainment purposes only. Today we talk about the Credmark and Steady State partnership. Neil and Joseph, could you please give us a short overview about what Credmark is and what it does overall?
Credmark is a decentralized protocol that is allowing people to use high integrity data to get risk modeling and risk metrics that are provided by the community for the community. And as such, we are looking for these types of strategic partnerships with things like insurance providers and yield aggregators in order to make sure that we are delivering the highest quality risk metrics that are available on the market.
This is awesome. Thank you. Please talk shortly about calculating premiums. What kind of work will go into this process?
So calculating premiums is something that we are really looking at our partnership with Steady State to help us figure out, because we are looking for an opportunity to give out metrics that would be used as inputs to the premiums. So we think of the risk stack very much as Credmark is delivering all the input data that Steady State needs in order to figure out any sort of actuarial work that needs to be done. And so the insurance providers would sit above Credmark on that state. And we would be able to feed any risk metrics to them surrounding the probability of exploits, surrounding market risk, surrounding liquidity risk, and then the insurance adjusters themselves would figure out the premiums based on a combination of our data and the demand, because the side of that we don't have is the demand information for these different insurance products. But I'm sure that Steady State can talk more about that side of the world.
Just to kind of highlight what Neil was saying about where Credmark falls in sort of the layer cake, the Lego blocks of DeFi. DeFi is layers, and anything on a higher layer is only going to be as good as the information or the protocol that it's built on. And so I think that's where I just want to highlight, Credmark are risk and data experts, and if we can provide, good data at a lower level, then that's going to enable the folks at Steady State to do things like calculate the premiums accurately in a way that actually reflects the market and the underlying data.
Yeah. If you think about DeFi real quick, and like risk rate of return is something we don't have any comprehension of in DeFi, right? You think risk rate of return on putting $100 down and getting an 8,000 return in this no value token, what does that even mean? And you think about how we work and interact in the DeFi ecosystem is like we don't take that into consideration. Credmark is actually taking the data and establishing risk, what you're onboarding with every ecosystem you use, and the return you're getting. That has very powerful implications in how we're developing DeFi and crypto in the DeFi, Steady State in the DeFi ecosystem. One, if we ever take assets you use and deposit them, what we're going to be doing where we're going to be doing those assets is, we're going to be depositing on all these crypto businesses and on-chain data, all these protocols. And Credmark can evaluate the risk rate return we're taking and making sure we're taking the lowest amount of risk with your assets at all times. When you're insuring a protocol in an index pool in our ecosystem, Credmark can be looking at what you're getting paid on a premium return and the risk you're onboarding to make sure you're getting onboarding at least a fair minimum you should be accepting, on top of any more maybe you can see as arbitrage or profit on top of the model you're receiving. Credmark, in my opinion, is going to be like the overseer across all ecosystems. We're like the sentinel, just watching everything and pointing fingers out to advise how you should be using your assets. And so with us, we're going to be using them just like they're meant to be used to evaluate risk-free return and how we're using it.
Yeah. Directly, Neil and Collier. I think the beautiful thing about Credmark is you guys solve two main problems: the data integrity issue that happens in the DeFi space, and also the risk modeling issue. And so when we integrate that with Brad, our risk analysis database, I mean, that's synergy there. We've been in conversation for the past couple of months. You guys supported us after the Texas Blockchain Summit a few months ago at our happy hour. And, I'm very excited for this partnership and to kind of build on, all the softwares and all the technologies that we use. Risk modeling is very imperative when it comes to RED, and that's kind of the main value proposition that comes from it. We want our community to interact with the data that we've curated, to be able to create their own models, to be able to do their own analysis, which helps the research process, which is the underlying process before you even enter the DeFi space and ape in, right? So there's a lot of synergy that's to be built, and I'm very excited.
Yeah. Just to bring it back to the original question, so when it comes to premiums, we're half of the equation, and steady state is the other half of the equation to figure that out, because they're going to have the front row seat to the demand side of things, and we'll have the front row seat to like the financial risk side of things. It takes both, and the insurance provider that has the best balance between their premiums and what their insurance and stuff like that. That's going to be what wins out in the long run, in terms of making this space safer for everybody. So we're hoping to come to those numbers together.
That's a very good point. Thank you. But Credmark is focused greatly on creating or being a community-driven platform. Can you talk about the community-driven aspect, how it works?
Yeah, so we are sort of introducing that step by step. So we have our risk team that is, experts in the risk space to say, here are sort of the fundamental building block models of any risk model, right? You've got to know how to calculate value at risk. You've got to know how to calculate the market cap of a protocol. So like for those fundamental models, we are really trying to define a language around it that we can then get validated by our community. And we think that the underlying blockchain data is verifiable. You can say to a computer, is this data correct? And the computer can say yes. And you don't have to trust another person to do that. Then you can take a step up and you can say, okay, we've got like the ones and zeros. Great. What do those mean? Like in terms of what happened actually in English, and we can decide on that, and we can say yes or no. And to a certain extent, that can be verified by a computer as well. It can verify what happens. But as soon as you go higher level than that, you've got human interpretation on any data that you are pulling from the blockchain, because you can say, yes, I got the number 2, but it's 2 of what, and what does that mean for my interpretation of something? Just as an example, we'll use the number 2 if we pull the number 2 off the blockchain somewhere. So is it $2? Is it 2 ETH? Is it so that those things are verifiable, but then is that adding to the value of a platform, or is that subtracting from the value of a platform? Those are the interpretation things that we're going to need the community to come in and say, yeah, you guys did this right. And yes, and if they are willing to say, yes, we want to help, we're making pieces of our platform totally composable so that you can say, I've got an idea for a risk metric or for a risk model, and I can build it. And if that's the case, if you want to share that with the world, you can come into our platform, build a risk model, and use our infrastructure, which is actually the cumbersome part of getting any of these systems off the ground, is that the infrastructure for databases and running timed jobs and things like that, all those infrastructure things are generally not what a risk modeler wants to spend their time doing. So you can come, use ours, share it with the community, and the rest of the community can use it as well. And then we all get rewarded via our tokenomics.
Yeah, that's a good explanation of what how our platforms can work, Neil. Just to build a little bit on some of the things we're doing specifically to actually, find who is our community. We've kind of taken two tracks. One is very sort of DeFi native. We want to build an organic community in Discord, figure out what types of people are interested. Some of the discourse that we're having with folks that we don't know from the internet that come into our Discord is really insightful, and so that's been really fun to see kind of organically as we start to snowball and engage with folks that have found us through our Twitter or otherwise. So we definitely want those people to be part of our community, in perpetuity. The other side is working with folks like Steady State, figuring out who else is doing a DeFi project that might have a need for this type of risk information. Because when you look at DeFi as a network of building blocks, it's really important that they all fit together and that it makes up a broader DeFi community as a whole, and so we can serve the needs of the industry as it grows, both from an individual standpoint and more of a project standpoint.
And I just want to add one more thing to that, Collier, as well. The reason that we are the reason that we want to bring the community along for the ride of Credmark is because DeFi changes really, really, really quickly. And we can't necessarily keep up with every single DeFi protocol unless we staff way up. And that's not the point of a DAO, is not to create a pantheon of dark mages of data. Those dark mages of data need to be spread out all over the world and be coming to agreement on that interpretation of the data. And right now, I don't really know of a lot of other people who are doing the kind of that same format, but I think it's a model that we're going to start to see pop up here and there, and we're doing it specifically for risk, and we are trying to focus on both sides of that coin, which is generating models and the validation side of models, because I think they're both really, really important when you're talking about risk, which is not only do you have to have it, but it has to be correct. And if you're human interpreting something, there's always that room for error. And so the more eyes you can have on it from a validation perspective, the better. And it can't just be mine. I'm one person, and I could be wrong. So it can't just be inside Credmarks, because we're only one kind of incentive structure. So you bring in everybody else to kind of help push this thing along and help make sure that the integrity stays really, really high. And then any of our partners, Steady State, can have data is going to be what drives insurance. Everybody's got to have the right data, and it has to be correctly interpreted.
Yeah.
So I can't stress that enough. That there are other data providers out there that are letting community people build things, but there's no quality control. So you can't build a platform on top of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's so that's where we're at.
And another thing to add on data is, think about insurance, for instance. We have a couple interesting approaches how we're going to insure, and we have models on models on models. But how insurance works right now, if anyone wants insurance, there's a user or the protocol, say if it was available, is their charge is 25% on whatever you want insured. That's outrageous. And the claim they have is inefficient data. We have inefficient data that counts, and we're going to give you some outrageous numbers. So if you want to use it desperately, our claim here is we're going to create efficient data to create proper actuarial and machine learning analysis to produce good outputs on risk data. So what Credmark is doing, what we're doing, is not necessarily perpendicular. We're parallel to what we're doing, versus what we're doing is a little more niche. What we're doing is more widespread, but the data is the same. We want efficient data to create actual efficient production results, and rather than skimping and creating bad narratives for people or protocols, we're actually trying to create good analysis to create good risk rate of return. And I think that's a really powerful need. We don't realize how impactful it's been on DeFi. A lot of protocols want insurance. I haven't talked to one protocol. They're like, I would love to insure and protect my community. And all of them look at, but if I go to any kind of provider, try to manage anything, one of the biggest problems, there are quite a few, but one of the biggest problems I see is like, how are you going to get me below 25%, which is outrageous, like, and the goal with Credmark and Steady State and what we're doing with Jasmine and Neil, what they're doing is not only do we want to get that lower, we want to prove that it should be way lower. And honestly, it really, really should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Since this is your channel, I've been hesitating from explaining too much about what Steady State does. I'm presuming that your audience already knows. But you guys have been so nice in helping explain what Credmark does, and I want to return the favor, but I'm like, this is your channel. They already know what Steady State does. But when I met John Libby, it was immediately apparent that like we had come to a lot of the same conclusions about what the state of the DeFi world was, and what to do about it. And we realized that we both tackled different problems in that sort of risk stack. And that's what made like a partnership not only entirely obvious, but like super helpful for both of us.
Credmark's still ahead of us, but as we evolve and we grow with all our partners, everyone's going to be needing this. Proper risk analysis at DeFi is going to be super, super important as we move to the next level of growth. And getting that next 100 million users or next 1 million active users in DeFi, when we get the real money, the real people, they're going to need this. And having this data openly available to create for them will be very, very essential. I believe. Very exciting.
They're not going to know that they needed it in the past if something happens, and that's the real trick. It's like convincing people to do that ahead of time.
Yeah, that's the truth.
That's the trick.
You make a good point, John. I mean, one thing that I always kind of like to look at and laugh a little bit is the state of risk management in DeFi right now. I mean, it's just hard to find any tools, much less good ones. There's a couple of centralized shops that do some, risk management assessment, but there's really nothing publicly available to your average user, much less an API or anything. And so, like, I personally see the work that we're doing at Credmark, and as well as the work that you guys are doing at Steady State, is absolutely paramount to grow the industry. You've got sort of a finite number of people that'll just ape into new protocols and try and get huge APY. You got to have some of those guardrails in place where people really can understand what's going on and see the data themselves.
Yeah, I definitely concur. For a good minute, especially since the inception of DeFi, people would have to actually go in and do their own type of assessment of if they want to invest in something or not, like seeing, if the documentation is high quality, or seeing if the actual protocol is doing functional testing, things of that sort. So this is kind of like a one-stop shop where you can go in, use our services and, just go from there in terms of investing into certain protocols. Especially since right now with the bull run, Bitcoin, every time there's a bull run, people don't really look at what's happening in the DeFi space, but it's a playground of hacks that have been occurring that are really, really crazy. Like, let's not forget, just a few weeks ago, we had the compound hack, the compound smart contract bug. Then we also had the Cream Finance hack again, $130 million. Like, that's in the top in terms of the leaderboard for hacks this year, and then in DeFi internally. So definitely great point. Definitely great point.
When we look at Cream Finance real quick, that's
we talk about it every day.
Neil's favorite topic.
This is a great example of you don't realize a lot of crypto and DeFi is actually built on a concept called derivation. You take one asset and you put another asset on top of it, and you base that asset on that asset, and you build assets on top of that asset. You value that asset on that asset, and eventually, or you take these three assets based on different things. It gets really funky, and it's very, very powerful. The amount of you can actually do this in DeFi, which shows how powerful it is. But I would call the Cream Finance bug not necessarily like a bug in the actual code. It was a bug in the derivation model they were actually using, how they were valuing an asset. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of those different questions and concerns come out in the future. But that's really the big problem is when you you have a USDC that's based on $1. You combine that you build an asset on top of that USDC that is like an asset that is based on the value of the underlying USDC. But then you combine that asset and say you mix it with DAI, USDT, and let's say Fei or the Fei token. You have like it's now based on 4 different assets. If one of those assets move or have any kind of fluctuation, and you don't actually change the value on top, then you can take advantage of that model. And that's what happens with derivatives, where something's valued on top of something, valued on top of something, valued on top of something, and then they break or slippage anywhere, and if you don't take into account the slippage in the actual valuation, then you can create arbitrage, or then you can exploit. And that's a lot of what we're having to see in these models is, understand there is a lot of derivation, which is a mathematical concept of the underlying, and how do we start interacting with this derivation models in a massive derivation system? And it's like cream finance is just something you can nerd out on all day, as apparently Credmark is doing. So
yeah. So you are the first person who comes to mind when we've been sort of developing a rubric or a language about how we're going to diagram that concept out, because there's mathematical ways to explain it, and then we're kind of thinking about like, okay, so how do we explain this to the average user? And so I'm really, really looking forward to your feedback when we've got that for you, because we're thinking about it as financial inheritance. If you've got this asset on the top that is based on the relationship of a price between two other assets that are moving up and down, it's like, what are you actually basing the value of this thing on top on? And if you do catastrophic, so when we look at catastrophic failures, we're saying if we take this node out or send this node on this graph to 0, what happens to the top asset? Because some of these things can be, it's vault with curve underneath, with Aave underneath, built on DAI and USDC, which DAI is also built on USDC, and USDT is a black box. So it's like, where in this chain of value, financial inheritance, where can there be a failure? And where are we exposing ourselves to sort of hidden assets like Curve? If I was holding the asset that got hacked is YUSD. YUSD vault got hacked or exploited, and all of these other assets that I had nothing to do with YUSD, but like Cream did, and so Cream wasn't hacked. It was one of their assets that were hacked that just allowed them to borrow everything that Cream had left to borrow. So me having no exposure to that asset, I didn't realize that I had basically all of my exposure in this one piece of my portfolio to a completely different asset that I wanted nothing to do with. And so I think that's also going to show the power of these kind of governance things moving forward. Because obviously that was a governance vote to add that bad asset in there. So it's gonna play a bigger and bigger role.
The Cream Finance hack was really interesting for us to look at as well, because right before the hack happened, we'd done some work to establish some financial primitives for these the Aave compounds, the same type of protocol. And what it let us do is look at how some of the sort of standards that we're starting to establish, what does liquidity risk look like on one of these protocols, for example, how they all interact in that sort of layer cake or chain like Neil was talking about. So how a flash loan attack resulted in an operational exploit, which created a liquidity crisis, which meant that you couldn't get your assets off of Cream. So it's been really interesting to watch that. Feel for the folks that lost money, but when you diagram it out, you can really start to see some of the vulnerabilities there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad we touched on the inheritance problem in DeFi. A lot of the times we can't forget like these DEXs, Curve Finances, Uniswap, they have children protocols into them. So what happens when those parent protocols kind of like get faulty or something happens? It always trickles down on the child protocol. So at a very high level, inheritance in computer science, typically like in classes, you have a parent class and then the children classes everything to it, and they inherit some of the methods and some of the attributes of the parent class. In DeFi, it's kind of a similar thing, but when we're talking about the actual parent protocols and then the child protocols extended to them, I mean, when hacks occur, it gets very, very very, very hard to kind of assess how those protocols will be impacted. And so on an insurance level, it takes granularity, it takes a lot of collaboration, and that's another reason why we're happy to work with you guys. But I think we have to move on to the next question.
Yeah. I can't say about that. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Thanks, guys. Actually, going back to the community part, first want to say very interesting strategy, very cool about this whole community thing. And we also have a question regarding this from our viewer, Creating Knowledge, who asks, could you name the most challenging parts of community driven?
Yeah, the most, I personally think that when you're talking about a DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization, the part of it that gets forgotten is the A. You need to be able to automate big chunks of this in order to let perfect strangers come in and actually provide any value at all. So to that end, our CTO is coming from like a strictly automation background, and we chose her on purpose because we said to ourselves, like, the most important thing about this being able to run long term is to be able to automate the idea that, like, if I am a community member and I come in and I have knowledge that I want to, or like I have something valuable that I want to contribute to this platform, we need to have that whole process automated, because there's no guarantee that they're coming from a place where they might be anonymous, they might be in a totally different time zone. How can we be ready to actually accept that that information that they want to share with us? So I think that the toughest part of that, other than just the interpersonal stuff of you have to be really redundant, because like not everybody sees your first message. So there's like some community building that's just like management in these sort of like social channels. Other than that, I think the thing that gets ignored is the automation side of things. So we're really hoping to dive really deep into it, but that is further down the road for us. We are still in the sort of infrastructural stage. And we want to get some really valuable risk models out that are built internally that we have verified, so that we can bring our community along with us on that process and eventually get to the automated side of things.
Building on what Neil said, a DAO isn't born a DAO. You can't just, launch a token and have an ecosystem that's just set up and running and it's decentralized and autonomous. There's a lot of building involved. But we want that building to be community driven, so that we can get to a totally decentralized and autonomous organization. And so while you're in this sort of intense building phase that we're in, if you want to do it right, you've got to be a good steward of your community and listen to your community. But then there's some very difficult decisions, because you hear some extremely good ideas, but maybe we're just not there yet from a tool standpoint, or we don't have the people yet to be able to do that at scale. And so it's a constant give and take on, we would love to do everything our community is doing out the gate, but you've got to do some work to be able to get there and have a durable autonomous organization.
I think another thing about DAOs, I think there's something fundamentally flawed in how we do DAOs. And it's because all decisions made are high-level decisions. In one sense, automation is very key in how you're building this. But DAOs only contribute often during high-level decisions. But there's in one sense, I think you want to automation, but also ways to participate in the automated system, maybe outside the normal staker model. That's something we're constantly trying to evaluate. And in our system, what we're looking to implement before we launch the DAO is establish roles that interact with in the ecosystem that you can participate in and actually receive value back for participating. Yeah. One example is something we've talked about, we kept hitting out a lot, but we haven't really gone into details, is something called a broker model. In normal insurance, when you want to bring a client on board, You can go out and get a deal, and then when you bring a client to an insurance company, right, you receive a commission, or a portion of what's paid out to the insurance company gets paid out to you. We want to do the same exact thing, where anyone, if they bring in a protocol, organize the premiums, organize the payouts, everything, like for the protocol, bring them in. If you organize that and it gets approved by our governance, right, to put them in our system, a portion of all the premiums paid out get paid out to you like a commission. It's an active way where you don't need a DAO necessarily as much. You need a DAO maybe to approve the governance, but we can also do that ourselves, right, as we devolve and move that way, where you can participate and fulfill a role in an ecosystem and receive real value for participation. And it actually builds the automated system very, very well. And I think everything, when it comes to these systems, it's like we need to build roles for people to fill in and bring it in, and not DAOs just thinking about voting on high-level decisions, but you can participate and actually build value. And I think this will be like models like this will see start popping up, because I think a lot of people are starting to have concerns with how DAO infrastructure actually works, and we're really starting to question, how does this all go together? Neil, what do you got to say?
I just wanted to build on you. You used the insurance version of that, and we're looking at the data provider version of that, where a data provider used to be a black box with customers, and now we're saying we've got the model builders, we've got the validators, and we've got the data consumers, and all of them need to have their own set of incentives to raise the overall value of our data platform. So we've done a ton of work, I think, in a similar way. Like I said before, John Libby and I come to all the same conclusions. Seems like we've done a lot of work in a similar way to establish those roles within the community to say you should be solving small problems, not these huge high-level things that come out all the time, and B, you should be rewarded for it in different ways, right? And so our data consumer is our customer, but they should feel but they're actually providing value to the platform as a whole. If we're thinking about what is the value of our data platform, it is the number of models we have times how much they're used divided by failures. And so validators are in charge of failures, model makers are in charge of how much data we have, and our data consumers are in charge of how much is actually being consumed. And so as you're extracting different types of value from the platform, you're also adding to it. And so I haven't seen a lot of analysis from many other DAOs about setting up their community members in such a way where they all understand we're all incentivized to accomplish this greater goal, but we all have we're all in charge of one of the variables in that equation, and yeah. So it's cool to hear that you're thinking the same thing. I actually hadn't heard you say that before. So
yeah, we're great minds think alike, Neil, right?
Or maybe we're just drinking the same Austin water or something.
Probably that. But yeah, those are the models you got to do, and not only fulfill the roles, you got to receive value. Eventually, I have ideas eventually when we partner how we can start, facilitating payments to communities to build that out. But when someone fulfills a role, we got to think about what is the world of jobs going to look like in the future. For me, one of my favorite philosophers actually brought me into entrepreneurship, and a modern philosopher is actually Naval Ravikant. And what actually interests me in Naval Ravikant is he established this idea that we have jobs we can do. Uber, DoorDash, where you can pick up a phone and immediately there's something that value can provide. But he argues one day there are going to be roles that can be fulfilled in that same manner, but at a higher level, whether it's consulting, whether it's investment banking, whether it's the dev work. And we're starting to see that evolve with dev work, right? My thoughts are we should build every ecosystem in this future world where anyone can pick up a phone and contribute value and get paid for contributing value. And the more value you can do to contribute, the more you can actually build a name for yourself. We can do that now in crypto and DeFi. We have the wallet address. The wallet address is immutable. The wallet address always tells you everything about who you are and everything you've done. If I contribute wallet value and I constantly contribute value, say in Neil's ecosystem, in the broker, in the database side with Jasmine, my wallet address, every time I receive a payment, proves the value I produced. And I think that's a really powerful model that we haven't actually really utilized yet in crypto and DeFi that needs to start being utilized more and more. And I think it's going to be very vital in how we evolve work in the future. Is the wallet address proves your history, and the history proves your value, and then people can find you wherever based on your wallet address. Ideally, it'll become a little more UX friendly, but that's there.
Really cool, John. I love it. But let's talk about the risk analysis database. How will Credmark and the technology behind it evaluate smart contract risks and vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I'll start this off, and I'm excited. I'm excited about what Credmark is doing. So everything from, Credmark's partnership, they'll be, fetching some of the on-chain and off-chain data, especially when we just mentioned the cream finance hacks, which is a multi-level hack, multi-level flash loan attack. At a very high level, it's very hard to kind of do that analysis, but with a partnership, especially with people who are, extrapolating on their own off-chain and on-chain data, we can just use what they have and make our own inferences and present those inferences to our community. Also, just gathering some of the raw data that pertains to exploits, using their operational risk registry, and also the risk library that you guys just published as well has been very, very useful to us. So there's a lot of synergy to be built, and it's also transverse. Full access to what we're doing with Red and what we're extrapolating. We take in data as far as contract hashes, block IDs, hacker hashes. And, when those big hacks occur, those big exploits occur, and people are asking so many questions like, what really happened here? We'll be the ones to be able to explain it, especially with our partnership with Credmark. So I'm very excited, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Neil, because I see that you you want to speak.
I mean, you nailed it in that. I'm just agreeing. That's an agreeing smile, is what that is. Yeah,
yeah, we've been talking about this for months. We've been talking about this for months.
So Jasmine mentioned one thing I want to plug on our side. So we're publishing a risk library right now, and that actually ties back into the community piece as well. So basically, all the work we're doing, we want as public as possible because we want our community along for the ride, like Neil mentioned. And so some of the stuff we've done in our risk library to date is starting to establish those financial primitives where we look at, what is market risk in DeFi? What is liquidity risk? What's an operational risk look like? And we can sort of parameterize that, and so that we can sort of apply these things consistently, and you can get apples for apples risk between protocols, between different types of protocols. So that's sort of a type of the work that we're doing, and we've got a lot of in-house risk expertise as well that's sort of building that.
Oh, for sure. John, I'll let you go really quick.
Nothing to say. I'll let you go. You guys know exactly what you're saying.
Just for our community, to give kind of like a good overview of what we're talking about when we talk about risk. We're talking about these exploits that happen in the DeFi space, such as infinite approval, rebase errors, exit scams, ICO scams, the smart contract bugs, smart contract exploits. So with all that being said, and there's way more as the DeFi space is growing, hackers get more clever. I mean, in the next few years, there might be a new, different type of hack that comes out of nowhere. That's how fast and how intricate the space is. And so that being said, I definitely think that there's a lot of synergy to be built. And I'm always going to press on this word synergy because I love partnerships with data providers such as Credmark, especially since we have a mutual partner as well, who is our client. There's a lot of synergy to be built. You're talking about a platform, a DeFi insurance platform, collaborating with a platform that also focuses on data integrity. I mean, that is very intricate. So I definitely wanted to just put that out there. But go ahead, John. I know you wanted to speak as well.
No, I mean, you said it, right? Jasmine's incredibly brilliant. I don't actually say that enough about her, and I'm excited to have her on the team. She understands, she's someone who takes her job so seriously. She still takes time off, but I swear she goes up, she gets up, she works. Then she said she goes home and researches DeFi and does DeFi for fun, just for a job. And then I'll get texts at 1 a.m. in the morning from her, hey, can we get a call? And I'm like, sorry, I was asleep. And then this morning, and then I wake up at 6:30 and I said, sorry, I'm asleep. She calls me. I'm like, what? Why are you not in bed yet? Like this, she's amazing. And the work she's doing, and she's a great contributor in the ecosystem. And I'm just like, I thought I worked hard. And I see her, and I'm like, okay, I'm out. So, like, new CEO. Yeah, I think what Neil is right? We need proper risk analysis, and these partnerships are going to be very intricate. So we're going to be basically taking, adding data in our ecosystem. Eventually, Credmark will be adding their ecosystem, and we'll see how this evolves, right? What if it eventually becomes one database, and Steady State just push all their data in there eventually, right? A lot of things could happen, evolve, and then we pull what we need to make our simple outputs. These are getting very intricate. And these relationships are really intricate because we've built the framework. Stani and the Compound team and the MakerDAO team have built a real solid foundation for DeFi, and we're seeing the next mode of how relationships build out in DAO to DAO. And DAO to DAO is going to be the future of how work interactions operate in this ecosystem. And what Jasmine is saying is absolutely right. Where we're going to be, we're creating complex teams between teams and groups where we can work, communities can work together and build together on a DAO to DAO basis. And that is the vision and the ethos of Steady State. One thing we know is we plan to build Steady State alongside all our partners, and we want to make this right. We have a lot of great concepts and great things that haven't been released yet. But say with the clients we plan to insure, their DAOs are working with our DAO to build our community. When we build a risk database, DAOs are working with that DAO to build that community, and we're going to be making sure we build the ethos of what DeFi is. It's DAO to DAO. And so these complexities will get more complex and get more complex and get more complex because we're building an ecosystem, and that's why we're all here.
That's great, guys. We have more questions from our viewers. So let's check here. Gaurav Sharma has asked, do we have white papers documentation of Steady State? Jonathan, give this maybe an answer.
Give that man a white paper. Yeah, SteadyState.finance has our V1 for our white paper. We're about to go deep in the woods and be redesigning it, with Jasmine, our CTO, and Tyler, and our team. We'll be redesigning a new one. But yeah, we have a lot of it, and a lot of the designs have actually evolved pretty dramatically. One thing, we see a lot of problems in how insurance works right now in normal DeFi, even for the staker. The index pool solves a key problem where, if you put $1 into covering a pool in Nexus Mutual, if an event happens like the Cream Finance hack, I lose all money I put in that pool. We risk weight and control the pool, right, with these index pools, where if an event happens, and you'll see in the white paper, where you experience very little loss. Our goal now is we've actually, Jasmine and Tyler and Krill have built a new model where we take the risk and we actually take your dollars, and you have to take a multiple payouts before you even see a loss. And it's a very interesting model in insurance where we've really evolved the model in Steady State, but you can see our original white paper on SteadyState.finance. It's very exciting to show off.
Here you go. And then we also have Joseph Smith, who asks, is there a way to measure risk of community members in a DAO? How do we identify bad actors, etc.?
I think that's a Neil question more than a Steady State question.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I started doing risk analysis work in DeFi in 2018. And when I got there, I was like, Maker already exists. We're already too late. They already ate the whole DeFi cake, was my first thought. And I was like, I was wrong. No, there was still plenty of cake to go around in the DeFi ecosystem. And so while not specifically community members, all of the work that I started doing, essentially I built a FICO equivalent for DeFi. And that's what Credmark was initially going after, was this credit scoring kind of world. And we have since realized that the bigger, juicier problem for us to solve is the risks associated with these sort of from the counterparty's perspective instead of from a lender's perspective about the counterparty. And so we've shifted that relationship a little bit since then, in this year, in 2021. But before that, it was very much looking at how do they respond to market events. And so that gave us sort of an equivalent that we were calling savviness. And so we can figure things out about an address's behavior based on what it does during different market events, and then based on how it is using these DeFi platforms. Does it have stickiness? So if you're a community member with high stickiness, you're more likely, you get exponentially more likely to hold the longer you're holding already. So the way to do that is to say, is this community member behaving financially in such a way that makes sense for that community member to continue to have the best interests of the platform in mind, is like kind of the only way that you can do that from a purely on-chain data standpoint. And that's a hard question to answer, because sort of the rules keep changing and people's attitudes about things keep changing, and people do become more sophisticated with time, and we don't have 12 years of history in order to do these kinds of credit scoring things. But that's how I would approach that problem. I think that the individuals are less of a problem in sort of DAO governance than I would have expected. So I haven't seen like a lot of malicious governance kind of attacks. That could be something that props up in the future, but I don't know what that looks like quite yet, because I'm not aware of. Everybody talks about it, and people do a lot of work to prevent it, but I think it's because it's sort of an obvious vector without like an obvious payout for that person. Like, what do you get if you do like essentially governance DDoS? I don't know. But the way to look at it is sort of how much damage could an individual do to a protocol? That's a question that we found a little more interesting and a little more sort of quantifiable.
I don't have anything revelatory like Neil, but I mean, I do think it's a good question, and it's an important one for DeFi to solve. I don't know if you guys have seen, but Aave is doing some interesting things. It's more around the governance space, but to get to full decentralization, where they're basically setting up, known, trusted community members that can do certain things. I just thought it's an interesting approach. We're watching everyone because I think it's that's where DeFi really does some revolutionary things in terms of evolving how we work together, etc.
And our token's called CMK. I saw it in the comments. If you want to get involved with the community.
Joseph had one more question, right? Kind of what I said in the quick model, the broker model, and why it's when I said the future of work looks like DoorDash and Uber, and you're like, yeah, well, they think, right? I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. So here's why DoorDash or Uber are broken. Let's start with inefficient data. The problem with a model, okay, when you have someone trying to provide a service and people trying to receive a service, and you're acting as an intermediary to provide that service, is you have two people constantly in flux with each other. One group wants the highest pay, and one group wants the lowest pay, right? And when the people who get screwed are the value providers, right? It's gonna be the brokers, or it's gonna be someone has to take a hit, right, where the payout pays out. The problem with all these different models is inefficient data. The models are dishonest in the sense where like the payouts are not clear who gets paid out what, and you're paid out more based on how much value you provide and how much you work. This system changes, first of all, in DeFi and crypto, where our ecosystem is much, much more transparent. And this ecosystem that are much more transparent, you can see the value being outputted by everyone and the value being provided by everyone. Remember that wallet address I mentioned. The other thing, big thing to mention here is these jobs are much more complex than these simple models where we're trying to actually screw people for more work. You have to work your butt off and put your car at risk and everything. With these models, this operates more like in a model where anyone can work, like a Uber or a DoorDash. But there's precedent in like a broker model or a value contribution model, where as the value becomes much more clear, where anyone contribute value, but the people who contribute really good value get paid, and the idea of the concepts become much more complex. You have to create a model where these third people that are providing the value in the ecosystem have to get paid something optimal, or people are going to copy and paste the ecosystem in DeFi and crypto and make a new one for this more optimal people. So we kind of saw that work with Uber and Lyft. But the problem also with these low payouts or people trying to get high commissions is massive overhead. Protocol, all these businesses and fintechs have massive overhead and are never profitable. And they charge dishonest rates that are below market average, so they get low revenue and they raise more money from investors. In crypto and DeFi, the models here have very no overhead because they're automated. So value has to be distributed properly in these ecosystems. If value is distributed improperly in these ecosystems, you can copy and paste and build a new ecosystem. And that's going to be how it works. And secondly, like if you provide complex value, like a very good sales agent or broker creates very complex value. And even though anyone can participate in the ecosystem, once you create complex value, you get paid very, very well to provide that value. And so how this ecosystem will evolve in DeFi and crypto is, yeah, the model of anyone can't produce more value or create more, like necessarily everyone's in the same ballpark. It'll always be unfair to those people. The wallet address changes that narrative where you can prove the value, and if someone says value, people are going to want them to work. And if you want to work, you have to provide value that justifies this person coming out of retirement on an island to come out and do something. And that's kind of the model about how these things kind of shift and change, is like you're going to see that. And you see it right now in crypto and DeFi, where you can provide value in code into a program and you receive value in a DAO ecosystem. The goal is to really take that model and build it properly and keep extrapolating and growing it. And so even though the DoorDash, Uber, I think are very native models we're going to see, they're very inefficient and very broken models that will evolve, I think, with Web3.
Thanks, John, for this. But it seems as that's it with our questions. I just got to say that listening to all that, it really seems I had this image in my head that, Credmark is one puzzle piece, steady state is another, and they just fit together very well. So definitely excited to see what this new partnership will bring. And many thanks to Jonathan, Jasmine, Neil and Collier for this great discussion. Many thanks to everyone who joined as well. And that's it. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice.
Thanks, everybody.